My name is Cathy Rabb, and I serve as Executive Vice President for JAMA, Jesus Awakening Movement for America, and I moved here a year ago. Back in about 25 years ago, a handful of Korean American Christians in the LA area felt this burden, a holy burden from the Lord that we are to pray for this nation, that it's only through the prayers of God's people that there will be revival and awakening and healing in our land. And we do this, we say, we have these three letters, O-I-L, right? Oil, that God is calling us to have ownership of our nation, and we do that through repentant intercession, I, and through leadership training, L, because leaders make the difference. And we talked last week about how in the past 40, 50 years, America's culture has shifted dramatically, right? From Judeo-Christian values to something entirely different. And if we were to look at what was happening on the college campuses back in the 60s, forward-thinking liberal professors, they took the best of the best, brightest students and started training them to think and to take action counterculturally. And just a few short decades later, that counterculture is now our mainstream, with biblical values laughed on and scorned upon. So back in 2003, you saw a video of our founder, Dr. John Kim. He was battling spinal cancer, and he didn't know if he was going to make it. And God gave him a vision and an assignment during that time to raise up a new generation of leaders who will instigate another counterculture. God told them that in about 20, 40 years, all those who are holding places of leadership in the major forces shaping our society and culture, media and arts, science and technology, politics and government, business, education, and so forth, will either pass away or retire. And will there be trained, spirit-filled, competent leaders who will fill the leadership vacuum that they will leave behind and transform those fields for the kingdom of God? Or will those places be taken over by their disciples? And he was told to start two things. One, a 40-day leadership boot camp with 20-somethings that will transform their passions, their thinking, their vision, and direction in life. And the second was to start a 4-year college where only the best of the best, in fact, it will only be 50 students per class, 200 students total, will be trained and will receive both the master's and bachelor's degree in 4 years and go on to the best PhD, JD, and MD programs around the world. And given how much effort and money both of these would take, when my boss came back from recovering from cancer the next year, I was like, okay, that's not going to happen. that's like impossible, But in 2007, we started our first 40-day leadership boot camp called Global Leadership Development Institute, GLDI, in Southern California. And you saw some of the alumni, some of the young people that spoke. They were alumni from our program. And since then, we've had 13 classes of students, 11 times in the U.S. The 11th one we just did here, we just finished a couple weeks ago in our new campus, and 2 in South Korea. Then there's the college. So when somebody had given us about 60 acres in the hills of Los Angeles, and we're from Southern California, and for this college, right? But it was so hilly that our architect looked at that and said, it's a nice piece of land, but it's going to be very expensive to build here because there's just no flat plain anywhere for us to build. And then the architect said, there are these Christian organizations, across the country that are either closing down or are closed, and they have, beautiful property. And he brought us the broker's video for Teen Mania that the bank was owning at the time, and says, see, for example, there's this great place in Texas, and look at this video. And we saw that, we're like, wow, that looks beautiful, but it was too expensive for us, and it wasn't in California. In fact, until recently, or until a couple of years ago, I've never even heard of East Texas. And sorry, right? Then my boss and a few of us visited in March of 2016 to the campus with the broker, and I looked at that. And that's when I started panicking, because I thought this college thing is like way in the future. My boss has these great visions from the Lord, and he's a go-getter, but I'm like the operations person, and I have to kind of try to make some of this happen. And I saw the property, and I thought, this might actually happen. And I started panicking, and I said, Lord, I can't even wrap my mind around this. But I thought, it's okay, it's too expensive. It's not going to happen. And at the time, I think when we first saw the video, I think the price for the property was $6 million, which is a great deal for that property, but it's still too expensive for us, so we weren't even, thinking about it. But over the next few months, we started negotiating with the bank, and the bank came to us in the summer and said, if you guys can, they really wanted this off their hands, if you guys can close on this property by mid-September, we'll give it to you for 3.5. And if you can't do it by mid-September, do it by mid-October for 3.7. So we, in the middle of July, signed a contract where we had to put down $70,000 as earnest money, and we didn't even have that. We had to borrow money to do that. And so we did it. And then we fundraised like mad. Right? And my boss is a phenomenal fundraiser, but we've never raised that kind of money in that short period of time, And we're, we were a really small staff over the past, 25 years. We've always only just had 5 to 7 staff members. And whenever we did these big events, we just got a lot of volunteers from local churches. And so we were always we're all about being lean and mean, right? And then so we were trying to raise all this money, and September 15th came around. We couldn't do it. So October 15th came around. I think we were at $1 million. So we begged the bank, can you give us an extension? So they gave us an extension. And one of our alumni from our GLDI program challenged me and said, why don't you, I know people are praying, but can you do a more concentrated, more intentional prayer effort with the alumni, with the young people that are, they're literally scattered all around the world, but let's do a virtual prayer meeting. And then another guy said, yeah, let's, because GLDI is 40 days, let's do a 40-day prayer-a-thon. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. That means I have no life for the next 2 months, But so every day, for an hour, we had this virtual prayer meeting, and I had to send out emails to everyone every day, hey, join us, and all this stuff. And during those 40 days, right, because I think my attitude was, honestly, I lived in Southern California 35 years of my life. This is home, right? And the place looks nice and all, but it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm a foodie from Los Angeles, and there's no good food out here. Sorry. And I was if this is the Lord's will, He will do it, whether or not I want it, whether or not I pray for it, whether or not I do anything. If it's the Lord's will, it would happen without me getting involved. But, He was pushing me, and He was making me do this daily prayer meeting. And in this prayer meeting and through the 40 days, as I was struggling with this and, trying to lead these alumni to pray and all this stuff, and I'm not a prayer warrior by, any definition at all. And in this, I felt like the Lord was asking me, do you want it? And I think I was like, it doesn't matter what I want. You're going to do what you want, so what does it matter what I want, And I felt like He was saying, do you want it? If you want it, I could give this to you, right? And it's okay, I want it. Okay, I want it, And just through the 40-day prayer, and towards the end, and after the 40 days, we had another 10 days. We were doing 3 hours a day. And then there were weekends on Saturdays. We were doing 6 hours a day. I thought I wanted to die, right? All this. But He made me be in the middle of that and to pray and asking and saying, Lord, I want this. And I remember a few months ago, the Ladies Bible Study was the series on Strengthen Yourself in the Lord. And I remember in the video, Pastor Bill Johnson talking about the difference between King David and King Saul, and how in King David, from the time of promise, from the time of anointing to be king to the time he actually became king, it was 10, 15 years of hell and back. For King Saul, from the time he was anointed to the time that he became king, there was really no waiting period. And both of these men started out as decent, humble guys who wanted to do the right thing. But the result of their lives was so different, because King David, the Lord made him suffer with him, and he grew his character, he grew his dependency on the Lord. And I remember after that video we watched in our discussion group, the question was, why is it so important to have that time of waiting between the promise and the fulfillment? And that question made me so angry, right? Because I thought, yeah, why? Why is that? Why do you do that, God? If you promise something, why shouldn't it be easy? Why shouldn't you just give it to us if that's your will? And what was also frustrating for me is, read Exodus, God is telling the Israelites, hey, promised land, come, I'm going to give you this promised land. And then right at the edge of the promised land, he said, okay, now I want you to go fight for it. I want you to go battle every day and drive out all these different tribes and nations that are there so that you could claim the promise that I've given you. And that's, for me, it was so mind-boggling. If it's your promise, why do we have to fight for it? Why do you have to give us the battles? And in that video, he said, the blessing that the Lord wants to give us is so weighty that he won't put it on a weak foundation. And I think about that, and I think about my journey to East Texas. And when it was first, he could have just, 3.7 million, that's nothing to the Lord, right? I mean, he owns all those cows on the hills and stuff like that, right? And it's nothing to the Lord. But in that process, he wasn't going to waste that opportunity to make me grow, to make the people that were praying with me grow, right? So all these young people who we saw our leaders take this very public leap of faith, right? That hey, we're gonna God has given us this promise, this land. He's gonna wants to make us he wants us to do this college. We have this property. We have this much to raise. We have this deadline. Hey, he's gonna do it for us, right? What if he doesn't? This would have been, I'm like, God, I kept praying God, this ain't gonna be good for your glory if this falls through. But in this process, in this journey, he was working on us. Right? He was working on me. He made me emotionally ready to leave my home of 35 years and to, come here, right? Where there's no good food unless you drive far, and sorry, and, he miraculously gave us exactly what we needed at the last possible moment, so that we could purchase this property. So at the beginning of our fundraising campaign to purchase this property, a Garden Valley resident encouraged us with a quote from Hudson Taylor. There are 3 stages to every great work of God. First, it's impossible, then it's difficult, then it's done, right? And I feel like we're still in the impossible. But currently, we're in the process of renovating our existing facilities and, raising money so that we could, paint the walls and all that, so that we could run our training programs and events and conferences and be able to rent out to other church groups. We're also working on the accreditation process of getting a college started. And our hope and prayer is that, God willing, we'll be able to have our first students in the fall of 2021. And a few months ago, we started a prayer meeting on Thursday mornings at 10 on our campus to pray for our nation, asking God for awakening and revival, and that he would start it with us here in Garden Valley. And then we're, next year, next May, on the National Day of Prayer, we're going to be inviting, all of us and other churches locally to our campus to pray for our nation. And our hope is that sometime soon that our campus would become an epicenter for revival prayer for this region. And we know that God has really used our campus, this property, this 471 acres, to touch so many lives over the years. Over the past few decades, and many prayers for revival has been prayed on this place. And our humble desire is that all of those prayers would be answered, and the legacy would be beautifully fulfilled through what will happen in the future on our campus. Thank you.